Welcome to the We Are City event virtual series. So we are going to wait for a few people to come in, but just a full welcome to those listening to the recording. Welcome everybody. I am Nicola Forbes Taylor. I'm really excited to be working today with We Are the City in their We Are virtual series. I was just chatting to Ellie beforehand, and Ellie thinks, don't hold us to this, but I think it's in the region of over 2,000 people who have attended We Are virtual events, and I say a big round of applause to We Are the City for that. That's an awesome thing, that we are helping people through this pandemic to be able to build your career set, to build your mindset that puts you in the great place to keep moving forward in your career and get through these difficult times. And I'm really excited to play my part in that today. And we are talking about psychological safety for you as leaders. I really believe it is a secret sauce to leadership. It's not so secret anymore, but it is your superpower in times of trauma. And a lot of people are talking about how we are in times of trauma at the minute. So this is your superpower. So I'm going to take you through that. I want to say, if you have any questions as we're going through, please feel free to add them to the Q&A box. And we have a chat box as well. If you have any problems or anything, please feel free to put any details in there if you're struggling to hear, or if there's any problems with the tech. And Ellie and the fabulous We Are the City team will be able to help. Q&A I will be answering at the end, but if there's any key questions that I spot as we go through, I will try and answer those as well. The slides will be shared afterwards, Sharon. Yes, thanks for asking that. So the recording will be sent out to everybody, so you will get access with that recording to the slides and also the audio exactly as we've seen it now. So you'll be able to see this. How meta is that? So before I get too carried away, welcome again. And we are going to go through psychological safety and the power of it and how it's your secret sauce. So why am I talking about this today? I'm speaking about psychological safety for two reasons. One is my personal experience, and one is as an individual, and one is my experience in helping others. So I wanted to share a little bit of that first, because that is why listen to me. That's the why listen to me bit. And my personal experience is that I have experienced great psychologically secure leadership from great leaders who've given me that space, and in all the elements that we're going to talk about. I've experienced that best intentions belief, where people believe the best about you, even when things are perhaps not great. They believe the best in your approach. Equally, I've experienced a spirit of suspicion, and what that's brought out in me, in not believing the best, but rather suspecting almost like the worst. And that has brought out a different response in me. I don't know if you can empathise with that too. So I've also experienced the freedom to operate that really psychological safety can give, but also the converse of that, the lack of trust in my role delivery. And I've experienced how that's impacted me as an individual and my performance, my mindset, my well-being in so many different ways. And I'm sure you can relate to that. That's probably why you're here today, that you've had those different experiences yourself. But I wanted to share that up front, because it's all very well talking about an academic approach, but I've been there and I've experienced both sides of this. So I wanted to say that this is coming from a place of experience and feeling the impacts of it. I've also been the person helping others, and had the privilege to work with people to develop more consistent leadership. Consistency in leadership is a key factor in creating psychological safety. I've also had the privilege to help people create real clarity of expectations in numerous organisations. But it's sometimes the smallest things that have the greatest power, isn't it? And that strength of creating clarity, so that you know what I expect of you and I know what you expect of me, and then we can work really well because we understand, rather than the assumptions, which of course we all know what assumptions make. And finally, I've worked with leaders and organisations to understand how to make conscious choices about the dynamics at play. I talk a lot about in my coaching and in my consulting work about what dynamics there are in relationships and what that brings out in people. And not just what this does, but also how this is actually part of this and this and this, and how they all interact with each other. If that makes sense? Those conscious choices that we make, it's like action brings reaction. And that action is a reaction to something else, and how it's all intertwined. And we're going to talk a bit about that. And that's where psychological safety isn't a standalone thing. It's part of a context. And so we'll talk about what that means in practice. But that's my insight and my experience as we start this journey over the next 60 minutes. I'll be talking to you and sharing with you some ideas. I also hope you have a pad and pen. I'm going proper old school today. Pad and pen, everybody. You are allowed to use your phone. If you want to use your phone to write a little list as well, I'm going to ask you to do your own audit. So I'm going to take you through what psychological safety is and what it isn't. I'll take you through your own audit, so have your pad and pen to hand. And I'm going to talk you through 3 ways to create stronger psychological safety in your team or teams, so that you can really take some practical things and you can put them into practice as soon as you want to. Okay, so if those are our objectives, let's get started. The first thing to think about is, how do we codify this? So what is psychological safety? Psychological safety, from the mother of psychological safety, Amy Edmondson, who actually established the term. Her definition is a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. I wonder what that evokes for you, because risk can sometimes evoke a feeling of nervousness, a feeling of negativity. Another lens to that is that risk can actually breed opportunity. Risk can breed innovation. And risk is what we take when we do something we haven't done before. And so it can be a loaded term, but actually it can be as much positive as it could be negative. It's the unknown. And if we're dealing with the unknown, we need to know we're safe to do that. And that's humanly what we need. And Amy Edmondson, whose book I'll be referring to at the end, The Fearless Organisation, she talks a lot about that in her TED Talks, etc. But I wanted to establish this common understanding of what we're talking about, because we can all come to this thinking, well, I would define it like this, I would define it like this. Based on this definition, the shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking, that is what we're going to be talking about. And why do that, and what does it bring? Key thought I wanted you to hold in your mind that is also worth codifying is, what is trust? Because trust is this basis of this interpersonal risk-taking. And it's that thought that trust takes a long time to establish, but it's destroyed in a moment. I often share that with CEOs, because we can do whatever, we can take all sorts of decisions, and ultimately the CEO or founder of an organisation has that authority to do whatever they choose. They are accountable for the outcome of that, but they can do whatever they choose, right? But I often say to them, just bear in mind, we can work for months, maybe years, to build trust with employees, with partners, with consultants. And actually, we can then take that away in just a moment. Is it really worth it? Are there other ways that we could do this that doesn't destroy that trust or erode it to the same extent? So using that as a lens to actually say to people, well, we can do all sorts of things that may seem like they're quicker, but that's a key factor when we're thinking about psychological safety. A lot of the things that we have in place or we take choices about erode or affect psychological safety because they affect trust. And trust is one of the underpinning factors. So bear that in mind as we're thinking through this, the importance of protecting trust. So what is psychological safety not? So we can talk about what it is, but it's important to establish what it isn't. So what it isn't, I'm going to talk about feeling. I'm going to talk about 2 other areas as well. Feeling first. what it feels like. You'll know this, that thing of what it feels like, that feeling of when you're not psychologically safe, feeling on edge, feeling unsure of what to expect from those around you, as in, are they going to accuse me of something? Are they going to be friendly to me? Are they going to be hostile to me? Am I able to share my ideas? How are they going to react? And you can see my eyes immediately become a bit, it's that sense of alert, being on alert, that fight flight sense, and that adrenaline and cortisol running around our bodies. Feeling anxious of what is being said about you, not feeling safe to believe that people are believing the best, but actually feeling like you're not sure what people are saying, and that nervousness, that hyper awareness of standing out, and hyper awareness being that almost uncontrollable state of ultra vigilance. And because of that, we could withdraw or maybe just mirror those around us. So what I mean by that is we're not just being ourselves, we're just acting like the people around us. A bit like, oh, you're having, the prawns, I'll have the prawns. You're having a cup of tea, I'll have a cup of tea. You don't want to do it? No, I don't want to do it either. Those sorts of behaviours, those sorts of actions, because we can't relax, we can't just be ourselves, we will just mirror those around us, we'll just be like those around us. When it's really unsafe psychologically, we can even feel humiliated. We can feel hurt. It could be that we feel confused or upset. It could be going home in times when we were going out, then going home, or ending a work day and talking to the person around us and people around us and saying, I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand these interactions with so-and-so in my team, or so-and-so who's my boss, or I don't understand, in that sense of constant confusion and being upset. Ultimately, that leads to us feeling really unsettled because we're never sure of where we stand. But also it can be the perceptions of our work. We're never sure whether people really are happy with what we're doing. Even if they're saying, kind of neutral things, we might feel like, are they actually really happy? There's something in our gut that's saying, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. I feel unsettled. I feel unnerved. I feel hyper aware. I feel anxious. It's not a good place to be. And if any of you feel like that, I will give my contact details afterwards because I'd love to talk to you, because it's a horrible place to be. And as I say, I've been there and it's not enjoyable. That's how we might feel if we're not psychologically safe. If we're not psychologically safe, what we might see are things like unfairness of privilege. And by that, what I mean is things given to a certain select few, and it being done unfairly, not democratically or based on meritocracy. The opportunity could be given just to this inner circle, this special group of people that have perhaps privileged status for whatever reason, or perceived privileged status. Ultimately, what you'll often see is inconsistency. That's the biggest thing that keeps you feeling this sense of unsettled and uncertainty and not knowing what to expect and not know what's being said, because there isn't consistency in treatment for you, but also treatment for others. Just the same as you could be praised for something, maybe another person is denigrated for it, or vice versa. There's just a complete lack of sense of where the boundaries are, where the foundations are, where the expectations are. And often what you see in these types of environments is credit taken by others. That could be a leader, a manager. It could equally be a team member. But this sense of stealing and this lack of safety or lack of credit given to those to whom it's due, credit taken by others. So it creates this sense of insecurity and lack of safety and lack of credit being given where it's due, that actually helps us feel good about what we're doing and what's expected of us. Finally, when we do not feel psychologically safe, we can be criticised for voicing our opinion. We can be ridiculed on a one-to-one basis. But have you ever felt this? You can also get that fake politeness. So that one-on-one, they're one way, but in front of other people, they're fake polite. And you know it's fake because you can sense the tension in the body language or the facial expressions. You can also be excluded from conversations. Maybe conversations, could be activities, could be social stuff, Could be, just information shared with certain people, not with others. It could be just like being back at school, where you're not invited into that place where people feel part of things. Ultimately, psychological safety is not feeling like you can be you, and you are accepted for who you are, and you're safe for who you are. So I hope none of you are feeling that way now. I imagine most of us have experienced that at some point in time. So those are the things we might feel, we might see, and what we might experience as individuals in an environment that isn't psychologically safe. But this webinar is about how we can create psychological safety. So if that's what it isn't, that's what we want to avoid. Let's think about what it is, and then we'll think about how we can create it. So what it is, psychological safety is that feeling that we're confident in the knowledge of what's expected of us. I know what I need to do. I know what my manager wants me to do and achieve this quarter. I know what's expected of me. It feels relaxed. That sense when somebody says to you, can I give you some thoughts on that? Can I give you some feedback on that? You're not immediately, what are they going to say to me? You're genuinely relaxed, and you feel like, yeah, they'll have some points, that I'm equally expecting positive things as much as I'm expecting things that could be helpful for me. And I believe they will actually help me. I'm not immediately expecting it to be an attack. My feeling is one of relaxed openness. It's a very different feeling, isn't it? And that feeling of being comfortable in yourself. And that this is about it's a diversity point. It obviously has impacts there. That's not my focus in conversation today, but it clearly has overlaps here. You can see that, right? But when you're fully yourself and accepted for who yourself, you don't need to be exactly like everyone around you. That might be how you look. That might be how you act. That might be whether you like going to the pub, whether you drink alcohol or not, whether you eat meat or not, whether you have strong religious beliefs or not, whether you like to ride a bike to work or not. All these things are you. And when you're in a psychologically safe environment, you feel comfortable being exactly who you are without having to think, I have to just mold myself to everybody else. And you can feel valued and appreciated for that contribution that you make. Credit isn't taken away. Credit is given. And you feel that value. If you've had that, I would just ask actually in the chat, can anybody share, if you've had that, can you just share if you've had that sense of feeling valued and appreciated? Because if you have, I wonder if any of you have followed managers or leaders that have helped you feel that way. I know I have. It's the type of person that you can trust them, and they create an environment where you feel valued and trusted. As well as feeling, what would we see? So we would feel really comfortable being ourselves. What we would see is opportunities given out democratically. If it's not democratically, i.e., people can apply and there's equal opportunities to apply, for example, to a promotion or an interesting project. I mean, maybe not even interesting, who knows, but a project or a role where it's not offered for everybody to apply, clear explanation being shared transparently as to why a certain person has been given that role. And actually just being open about it. It could be so-and-so has actually worked on this project while we couldn't actually share it with anybody for the last 6 months. And this is actually a recognition of that. And they have unique insight because they have this knowledge and this skill. Whilst we may not all like that, we find that easier to accept than no explanation. Transparency on that similar point, but also consistency in the treatment of you and others. So you've not got this question of why am I being questioned about this and someone else isn't? But a transparency around expectations and around treatment and consistency in that treatment. Whether that means difficult conversations, whether that means great conversations. Consistency. We'll naturally warm to some people rather than others, won't we? But if someone has been treated consistently and they do a great job, they should be praised and celebrated, whether they're the person that we get on naturally the best or not. So as managers, encourage you to think about that. If you've got your pad to hand, think about that, how you can be consistent in the positive as well as in the things that might be more negative, more challenging. And that public celebration of others, you will often see this in a psychologically safe environment. And you will see different people being celebrated. It's not always the same people, because it's not this inner circle concept. It's this public celebration and different people being recognised for their contribution. And often you'll be thinking, oh, that, I didn't know about so-and-so working on that. Or, if you're new to a business, what I really love to see is different people and different personalities being recognised, because that truly means that they're being recognised for who they are, not because they're all the same as the founder or this inner circle. But this public recognition is a really positive sign of a psychologically safe environment. Because what that means is the leader isn't insecure. The leader isn't having to say, well, I'm going to hold this back for me. I'm only going to hold on to this celebration for myself and talk about it with my manager and my recognition in mind. I'm more than safe to say my team are doing a great job because I feel safe in myself as a leader. So that's what it's communicating when you're thinking about that as a leader. And then the being. So what would you experience when you have psychological safety? Because this is all about, well, why do it, right? So what we'd experience is this encouragement to voice an opinion. And by that, I'm saying it's not just have you got any feedback? It's what do you think? And that ongoing question around what could we do differently? How could we approach this? That empowerment to say, you come up with the how, this is the result we need, go do it. This is yours. As opposed to, I've designed the spreadsheet with the tabs that you need to fill out. You use these words and there's a drop-down menu. Have you ever been given that? I've been told recently about, somebody who thought they were empowering, but they created all the how of how to get the result. It's not empowering. It doesn't feel empowering. But when you're encouraged to come up with your own ideas, suggestions, approaches, and sometimes those opinions could be, I'm not sure that could work because this, and this. How could we overcome that? Sometimes it could be, we can't do it this time. It could be, I like the idea, but I'm not sure it works. It's not always having them implemented, it's having them listened to and considered. So you will feel encouraged then, if you've ever experienced that, I'm sure you have, to come up with more. It actually opens up more innovation because it encourages people to share rather than hold back. And when we don't feel safe, what we do is we hold back. When we're treated with respect, we experience psychological safety. We don't have to agree with everything someone says. It's about asking what their opinion is. We don't necessarily even have to understand it. It's that thing of that's that person's experience, that's that person's perspective. It's okay not to agree on everything, and it's okay to not understand everything. What you do is you accept that person even with that. That's when we feel that we can say, I don't have to be the same, but I can contribute and I'm valued here. I know this is the converse to the other one, but this feeling included in conversations is so important. Remembering, for example, hopefully we'll take this forward when we find our new way of working, whatever that means. When people are in different locations, we remember that people are in different locations. When people work different hours, we remember that they work different hours. When people have different preferences, so-and-so doesn't like, rock climbing, they're scared of heights, as much as it could be so-and-so for their faith doesn't like doing that. When we think of those things, we actually are including people and we remember to include them. That is really, really important. When someone remembers us, it could be at this point in time, someone sending you an old-fashioned 2D card, happy birthday, or I'm thinking of you. It's that feeling we get. That feeling, I think it's a dopamine hit we get. Someone tell me if I'm wrong, if it's the wrong chemical. But that feeling of feeling positive. Someone's thought of me. I feel part of this. And those chemicals basically increase our sense of feeling connected to people. And that creates an increased sense of trust. So these things are already, hopefully you're writing down some tips, already some ideas of what you can do to make sure that people feel part of your team, people feel welcome, people feel psychologically safe, and that they're committed to your team. So what does that mean then? If that is, we've considered what psychological safety isn't and psychological safety is in terms of feeling, seeing and experiencing. What does that mean? So what it means is three things: for the individual, for the leader and for the organisation. For the individual, what you get, I've already mentioned it quite a lot because it's so crucial, is trust. When you have that trust, I'll explain what that means for the leader and the organisation. It's very, very powerful. For the individual, you feel trusted and you give trust. It's a two-way street, isn't it, with trust? You are more likely to be much more productive. And if I say the words work to rule, does anyone experience that or know that? When we don't feel safe, when we don't feel trusted, when we don't feel accepted and celebrated for who we are, we're much more likely to do the minimum. We're much more likely to say, I'm going to work my hours and no more. I'm going to give the basic of what they've asked me to do. I made some suggestions and they said, no, just do X, Y, Z. And you say, okay, fine. That's what you'll get. You've experienced that, haven't you? I can tell. So if you've experienced that, what that leads to is lower productivity, because essentially you're getting minimums from people. You get very moderate risk taking. So rather than people trying things out, rather than people taking ownership for things, you get much less of that. You get people pushing back, saying, oh, no, I don't think we should do that. And it could actually hold you back in terms of progress, innovation, getting market share. It can have real impact in your business because people aren't feeling that they want to push the boundaries. They actually want to stay very much within the boundaries, because why should they? Creativity is a link on the innovation. As I've mentioned, diversity leads to greater innovation and creativity. This sense of feeling safe leads to creativity. And the reason is, when we feel threatened, I mentioned the fight-flight response earlier. When we feel threatened, our body floods our system with adrenaline, and it's taken around our system by cortisol. What the body does to ensure that, Marta, you'll know this because we were at the same lecture that was reminding us of this, it shuts down our creativity in our brain. So the part of our brain that processes creativity shuts down to enable us to just run. So it just focuses on physical rather than creativity. When that happens then, over a consistent period of time, we have less and less and less creativity, because all our body is focusing on is survival. So it's producing lots of adrenaline and cortisol, which also can make you sick because it reduces your immunity, because that cortisol suppresses white blood cells. But it doesn't help creativity. And that's what we need in times where we actually don't know what the future means. We're going to have to try and be creative. But if we're not enabling environments where people feel they can, we're not going to optimize that. Where we have psychological safety, we get much lower stress levels. So all that cortisol, adrenaline scenario, we have much less of that, because the brain isn't constantly triggered saying, got to fight, got to run, got to freeze, got to fight, got to run, got to freeze. It feels that sense of when you're asked about feedback, you don't get that immediate reaction. That sense when you're asked to present something, you feel, well, people believe the best about me. They're going to support me. You don't feel threatened. That sense of people wanting you to do well, that sense of people actually expecting you to do well because they think you're great. It brings that such a different environment, and our stress levels are much lower. And as I'm sure you can join all those dots, this creates much stronger relationships. Psychological safety creates strong teams. What that then you'll create is teams that will help each other and support each other, not just the leader. So we're going to talk about the leader in a moment, but those strong relationships support much more than just one individual alone. It builds out and out and out. So that's what psychological safety brings to the individual. To the leader, what it brings is deeper connection with people. When you feel trust and you trust your leader, You will be much more open. You will raise obstacles potentially. And those obstacles, when you read about psychological safety, Amy Emerson in particular talks about this, that when you raise obstacles, you could actually identify a solution to something that might short circuit something that would actually subvert a project. If you don't feel safe, you're less likely to raise those obstacles and just let them happen. And that means that the business could suffer, the project could suffer, all those other things we've already started talking about. You get that deeper connection, that deeper sense of trust that is two-way. What that brings personally for a leader, so for you as leaders listening in, this sense that people have got your back. If you've ever worked in a team where you feel that your team hasn't got your back, and unfortunately I have, I've experienced that, and it's horrible. You have all the responsibility without any of the support. It's a horrible feeling as a leader. When you have psychological safety in your team, you have the opposite. You can operate knowing that your team will support you, your team will defend you, your team will be saying, whoever comes and asks you for stuff, I'm sure she's on it, I'm sure we'll sort it. It's that feeling, and honestly, you can't buy it. It's incredible. What that also brings is a reliable output. You as a leader can trust if your team say they're going to do something, it brings much more reliable outputs because they will support each other and you to ensure you get that output, rather than stepping back from it and saying, not my job, not in my job description, or, well, I did my bit. It's that, additional support that you'll get from people, that additional buy-in, that discretionary behaviour. And finally, proactive identification of challenges. And I've kind of mentioned this already, but you will get that as a leader when you give psychological safety. All these things are things that it's not like you can write it in a job description, can you? It's just like, apart from you could say delivery, but these things are the intangible, the trust, the commitment, the connection as a team, the having each other's backs, the believing the best in each other. It's incredibly powerful. Finally, what does that bring to the organisation? It basically brings reduced turnover in employees. If you see a company, I'm sure there's many that come to mind for you, when you look at the adverts on LinkedIn or Glassdoor or Indeed, whichever job board you tend to look at, if you see a name that's coming up a lot and you're also not seeing them in the FT for huge financial investment, the likelihood is their environment is not psychologically safe and they've got a revolving door. And what that leads to is people saying, do you know what? Tap, tap, I'm out. Because people don't need to stay in places that they don't feel safe, particularly in thriving industries. There may be some changes in that we'll have to watch and see over the next few months. But where an industry is thriving, for example, where I work in startup and scale-up tech a lot, you see engineers who are people programming, coding, maybe developing, maybe some of the product developers as well, UX, user experience in a program or an online experience. They can move around to lots of companies. Even now, you could walk out of a job into another job. But there's certain jobs that are more pressured, and there's certain industries that are more pressured. This can be an indicator, of course, with the current climate in mind, but this is a very clear indicator that you can have, or if you're in HR, if you're somebody in HR signing in today, if you look at your data and you've got very high churn and you've got high recruitment costs because of it, this could be an underlying factor. And it's not A plus B equals C or 1 + 1 = 2 equation. It's part of a bigger picture, but this will be one of the underpinning factors, and I'd love to talk to you about that, because it's something I'm fascinated about. I have to kind of shut up about it sometimes. And you get increased engagement. I'm sure you get that. You can see that when you build trust, when you build relationships, you get engagement. And when you have engaged employees, you have engaged clients. There's so much research on that. Richard Branson was famous for saying, look after your employees and the clients, they'll look after the clients. You start with the employees. You get increased innovation. I've talked a lot about people not flagging things or not being able to be creative or not being able to innovate. You also get a reduction in errors because people are comfortable to, and by errors I mean end result errors, make mistakes, learn from them and correct them themselves, or support each other with errors. That sort of fail fast, learn fast, but not projects that end in disaster, goals that aren't hit, those sorts of errors, quality errors that are missed, regulatory issues that are missed. You get a reduction in those because people are taking increased ownership, people are helping one another, people are willing to spot things, try things, and correct things themselves. So you get a huge amount of benefit. So what does that mean for you as a leader? I want to take you through your own personal audit. So I think you might have had your nice old school piece of paper. Everybody, let's go old school. So old school piece of paper, I'd like to talk you through your audit. Because if we've talked through what psychological safety isn't and what it is, what it can bring to the individual, the leader, and the organisation. So hopefully you're thinking, yeah, I'd really like more of that. How can I do it? So this is an audit for you as a leader to start thinking through how you approach things. I'm going to talk you through 2 slides, and you can take yourself through each of the questions and each of the thoughts and rate yourself. What I'd encourage you to do is rate yourself between 1 and 5. 1 is either I never do that, or that's totally not like me, or I do that, I'm not proficient at that at all. That's really something I'm not good at. Versus 5 being, I do that like every day. I'm really pleased with how I do that. I'm proud of that. I'm great at that. So it's that sort of 1, really no, totally no one would say that about me. 5, everybody would say that about me, and I'm really proud about that because I've perhaps worked on that a lot myself. So taking you through each of those areas then, there's 5 points on this one. So I'd like you to just take a moment to reflect on your pad, just to write down 1 to 5. And then what we're going to do is score each of these, and you can work out your percentage for these really, really simply. So even for people like me who perhaps are thinking, oh no, maths, it's fine. You don't even need your phone, it's fine. So first one, I know what is important to me. So for some of us, that might be values. That might be thinking through how I want to be, what impact I want to have on people. I know what's important to me. So for example, for me, what is really important to me is being given freedom to operate. That's really important to me. So that's the example. So if you are really clear on that, it's a 5. If you're thinking, oh, I'm not so clear, it might be a 3. If it's, I've never thought about that, number 1. And all these things are things you can work on. So nobody's looking at these scores apart from you. Number 2, I stand up for what is important to me. And a 5 is consistently. Okay. So it could be about pushing back. It could be about standing up for someone else. If what's really important to you is about, for example, respect, it could be, please don't use that term. I find that really offensive. It could be, why we use that word? That's not a word I'm comfortable with. However it is, it could be, you give me till the end of the month. I can give you an update, but as I said, please give me the space and I will deliver for you. Whatever that thing is that you're standing up for, you stand up for it. So how often do you stand up for it? It could be that we know about it, but we're not implementing it and standing up for it yet. That could be the next step. That's your next challenge. Thirdly, I understand when I'm part of a drama triangle or when I'm playing games. This is something I'd love to share with you guys more. By all means, connect with me and we can talk about it more. But the drama triangle is at the bottom, you get the victim, you get the enabler, I've forgotten the word now. And then at top you get, aggressor, like the bully, victim, bully, and hero. So at the top where my fingers are here up by my nose, that's where you get your hero, and you get victim, and you get bully. So bully is over here, victim is over here. And in this triangle, when you have these dynamics happening, you have somebody always taking one of the roles. And often when people are complaining about things and when people aren't psychologically safe, they can go into a victim mode. And what that is it kind of locks us in to sort of feeling like I'm powerless, I'm a victim. We can talk about other people being the aggressor or the bully. And sometimes as a leader, we could be perceived as the bully. Sometimes as the leader, we might go into hero mode. Oh, let me save you, let me rescue you. And when we're playing our part in that triangle, maybe sometimes as a leader, we're even becoming a victim ourselves. Maybe we're thinking, oh, I'm powerless, I can't change this. And that's human too, right? Understanding when you play a part in that triangle. And that can also be referred to as playing games. And we'll talk about different psychological approaches. So out of 5, that number 3. And then number 4, this is a psychological process based on transactional analysis. For those of you who may have encountered this, where you have ego states of parent, adult and child. And what this can mean is that we're either talking to somebody, I'm okay, you're okay. That's an adult to adult conversation, basically. The moment we step out of that, we're stepping potentially into another role, either of a parent or of a child. And what that means is this point I was saying earlier, that how I approach things in my mind and in my speech and in my behaviour can get a reaction from the other party. And as a leader, when we can go in not adult to adult, as in I'm okay, you're okay, I don't have to understand or agree with everything you say, but I can respect it, we elicit different things from people. So if you have come across that concept before, I'm sure it'll be very familiar. If you haven't, just have a think about when you go into conversations with people in your team or other teams, what are you aware of in terms of whether you're having that conversation with an openness with that individual, or are you coming to it with a sort of preconceived idea or a judgment? That can be where the dynamics are coming into play. So do you do that very consciously? You appreciate those roles, or are you not aware? And that would be a number 1. Finally, on this one, you can actually moderate and change your behaviour based on these understandings of the drama triangle, parent, adult, child, maybe some other concepts that you've read about and started putting into your way of working. You can actually, in a moment, think, I'm not going to react to that. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to choose this through processing it in a different way. And I'm going to consciously focus on my positive impact. If you have been working on that, well flipping done. It's really hard work. Keep going. So keep going with that. But if you don't regularly do it, give yourself a score less than 5. Okay, so that's your 5. I've got another 5. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move this on. So all you need to do is total that out for those 5 questions, times it by 4, and you've got your percentage. But don't worry, you can do that after. Just make a note, times by 4. All right? Okay, a few other questions. I'm going to take you through, again, rating between 1 and 5. I'll talk you through these a little bit quicker so I can make sure we have some time for reflection. So first one, this is about considering your behaviour. Think about strength of your behaviour and think about consistency. It could be that you do it really, really well, but not as consistent, in which case it wouldn't be a full 5, okay? So first of all, asking for feedback. And you ask for them with a mindset of you're curious. You genuinely want new ideas. You genuinely want feedback of how you can make things better. Like a sports person, I can only get better if I get this feedback, okay, from this place of security. Secondly, mark that out of 5. Secondly, I confirm timelines with my team and I follow through on those timelines. I don't just say, I want that by Friday and then don't ask about it till Monday. All right? About being clear and consistent in timelines. I explain how I need updates or communication on a project up front. So it's not just, oh, just keep me up to date. It's, I need a weekly update. I have a leadership meeting on a Friday, so if you can give me an update on the Thursday, that'd be fantastic, so I'm fully prepared. Other than that, you're free to go. Versus not saying anything and then coming over to their desk, obviously virtually at the minute, it'd be an email or a chat. Where are we with this? Where are we with this? Where are we with this? So agreeing the updates and sticking with them. Fourthly, I'm consistent in explaining what we are focused on delivering. So as a team, we have a shared purpose and I consistently reinforce that. Score that out of 5. Number 5, I establish structure for performance. So with my team, I have things like regular catch-ups. I have conversations that are about support. I talk about learning. I arrange mentoring. It's not just all about task. Okay, we talk about well-being. Okay, and we put different things in place to support those. Do you have those in the diary? Do you have time allocated? That's how you really embed this. Number 6, I encourage learning from failure. If your automatic response to that is yes, how? Okay. If you're clear on your how, it might be a 5. If you're less clear on a how, it might be lower than that. Right? I give credit to my team, number 7, publicly and privately. Some people, of course, don't like the big public shout out, particularly individually. They may like it as a team publicly, but not individually. So understanding that. But the important thing about giving credit to others, not just taking it for ourselves. So do you give that credit out? And finally, I encourage conflict to be approached with a mindset of curiosity and collaboration. Challenging one, huh? But when you're talking about this with your team, you role model and you encourage them to approach conflict with this mindset. We're solving this together. How can we do this? How can we make this better? Rather than this, they're wrong, we're right, which is parent and child. All right. So you've now got another score. You need to calculate that, and I would suggest get your percentage. You can times it by 2.5 is your top tip, but calculate your percentages. What I'd like you to get from those, I'd like you to think about your audit ratings, thinking about what did you actually think you might score versus what you have scored. Just take a moment. Any reflections on that, dear panelists? Any reflections of where your strengths have come out, where things are coming out in different scores and different strengths to what you expected? Yeah, I can see for some of them it's surprised people of what actually is coming up, So I'd encourage you to keep thinking about this. Keep thinking about how can you take what you've reflected on now and take it as an action plan, because your audit is giving you an insight. And I would suggest there's 3 things I want to share with you before we go. I'm going to open up to questions, so please put any questions in the Q&A so that we can finalise with those and make sure that it's your chance to ask your questions. But if you've just completed your audit and you've got some thoughts, well, what can I do about those? Here are 3 ideas, 3 areas that you could potentially work on. You may, from your audit, have a direct thought of something you want to work on. I'd love to hear from you and talk to you more about those. Here are 3 things that create psychological safety. Be open, be consistent, and be a role model. And as a leader, these 3 things will develop your superpower. I'm going to talk you through just some practical ways that this works. Being open. Be open to feedback. Come from this place of, I am secure. I know. Develop that. If that means working with a coach to develop that, great. I'm a huge believer in coaching. I would be. I'm a coach. But I really believe it helps all of us. It helps me, helps you to be the best leader we can be, so that we're not coming from a place of security ourselves. So ask for feedback, how we can improve, and whether that's as a team, as an individual, as a leader. Be open to ideas and be open to changing the plan. I know I hold my hand up. Sometimes I've had a plan and I just want to get through it. And sometimes people have said to me, it's on your list, isn't it? And you just want to get your list done. And I've had to say, yeah, actually, I'm such a results-focused person. I'm like, I want to get through my list. But actually, sometimes it would have been better. And sometimes when I've experienced stepping back, it's been better. So step back and be open to changing and evolving the plan. Finally, be open to managing F-ups, we might say. Things will happen, things will go wrong. And these are the critical times that people can find out, are they safe with us as leaders? If we give them that space to say, okay, we've F'd up. And I'm talking about those times where it really is an F-up, like payroll was completely wrong. Data was completely wrong that the business made a decision on. something was said about somebody or a data leak, those sorts of really big things, that's when we're tested to say, okay, what are we going to do about this together? That doesn't mean we don't say to somebody, yes, you have really messed up and it's really serious, but this is what we're going to do about it together. And it's working that through together so that people see that fairness and that consistency in play. So that consistent point, really important for us as leaders to be consistent in one-to-ones. I've never worked anywhere where one-to-ones haven't been cancelled. It seems to be that they're almost like an optional extra. They're not an optional extra, they're important. When we give our time to our team, it says you are important. And by taking away that time, or you sort of disposing of it when we need to, also conveys a message. So think about that. Protect and be consistent in your one-to-ones. Be consistent and empowering, even when it's hard. Even when you can see your team members struggling. That doesn't mean you don't offer support, but you don't just step in and rescue. That's the going into rescue hero mode and then going into victim mode. There's different approaches, and I'd love to talk to any of you about that who'd want to. Be consistent in communicating. If you say you will always keep people up to date, keep them up to date. Sometimes we can forget that when our heads go down into the detail. And that includes being honest when we make a mistake. I'd say my personal experience, when I've been open with people and said, I've cocked up, guys, I've done this. I have seen my team rally around me like nothing I have experienced. When we are vulnerable, because when we create that trust, people want to help, the same as we want to help each other. Final thoughts from me. Be a role model. This really creates psychological safety. Understand what triggers your behaviour, what things really pee you off, what things bring out the worst in you, what things bring out the best in you, and help them to understand that too about themselves. Be conscious of what things bring out the best in you, those games you play, and what choices you can encounter, you can experience and engage with. Coach can help you with that. And believe the best intentions about other people. When we say, I'm sure they were doing things believing the best, what went wrong? It's very different to, oh, why did they do that? It takes our mind to a different place. It helps us engage in a different way. The 3: open, be consistent, be a role model, and you'll develop your superpower. So we've covered what psychological safety is and it isn't. We've thought about how you measure up. I leave you with that audit to think through some more. And we've got our 3 ways there of considering how you can empower psychological safety. I've got some questions coming in. Final question, then I want to share some resources with you. The question is, would you suggest counselling for an individual that's been bullied in the workplace and lost their self-confidence? Should it be done arranged by the company? So thanks, Roxanne, for the question. So first of all, what I would say is, you say counselling. If I change that word, would you suggest help? The answer is unequivocally yes. If somebody has been bullied in the workplace, so you know, should that be arranged by the company? I'll answer it all in that context now. Should support be given? Yes, 100%. Should it be counselling? I don't know. And the reason I don't know is it's about that individual. And for some people, bullying can bring up things from our past that are very deep-rooted, and therefore counselling with a trained psychotherapist may be the most important and most appropriate approach. If it's impacting them in other ways, it may be that coaching is helpful for them. So if it's, like you've mentioned in particular there, it's really affected their self-confidence. You said they lost their self-confidence. I would suggest coaching could really help with that, because it's about developing this awareness of how we can think about things differently. I work a lot with people who struggle with that self-confidence and maybe have experienced some of that toxicity and perhaps places that were less than psychologically safe, should we say at least. And coaching is really powerful for us to rebuild who we want to be. We can explore some of those choices in how we think about ourselves, how we behave, how we react when people interact with us in certain ways that might be bullying. And it takes the power back for us. If it's deeper seated, maybe counselling could help. In terms of what the company offers, with my HR hat on, what I would say is it depends what how you've dealt with it so far. If you've dealt with it very formally, it may be that you give them an amount of money. If they're still working with you, it could be part of your package. I happily talk to you offline, because without further context it's hard to say, but I think it would be a very generous offer for a company to support. But if you haven't upheld a grievance, for example, paying for that might be conflicting if you ever faced any legal action. So I'd just be mindful of how you do that. So thanks for your question, Roxanne. And by all means, let's link up on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from any of you and follow up on that in particular. Wanted to share with you before we finish some recommended resources for you. For those of you who haven't read Amy Edmondson's book, either read the book or watch her TED Talks. She is awesome. I think she's at MIT at the minute. She's worked with some fabulous American, very highly respected universities, and so her research is really robust. Really great book and great insights that she talks about in her TED Talks. Timothy Galway's In a Game of Work. This is all about understanding the games that we play that I've talked about, and this psychological things that happen with parent, adult and child, and things like our drama triangles. That helps us understand. When it talks about inner game, it's basically talking about what happens in our minds. Fantastic book, really, really easy read. The Chimp Paradox is also about the inner game in a way, and it's written by Professor Steve Peters, who worked with some Paralympians, the Olympic cycling team, and he talks about how by managing our mind, and particularly these stressors, like things that make us think we've either got to fight, run or freeze, by managing that response, which he calls our chimp, we can operate differently. Very powerful, not an easy read, but he does actually write books for children as well. Maybe start with those, because he digests it much simpler, and it's not as long a read when it's for the children. But it's great concepts, really powerful. I've instilled them in organisations, really powerful. Then 2 TED Talks. Glenn Ralston talks about toxic environment, talks a lot about gossip, very challenging. And Lucy Home talks about, she's either New Zealander, she's definitely Antipodean, either Australian or New Zealand. And she talks about resilience from her own experience, which is a heartbreaking experience and super, super powerful. She's super resilient, very, very human with it. So I would like to offer anyone on the call today a free consultation for bespoke coaching with me. I would love to connect with you. Connect with me on LinkedIn. These are my details. And I would offer that free bespoke consultation for executive coaching to help you be really powerful and intentional in your leadership. And these are my upcoming talks there. So I'm speaking at a number of events with Future Ignition, CNC Search and Women of Silicon Roundabout, WinTech Series in December as well. Coming up for We Are the City is their next event this Thursday. If you are free at lunchtime again, then you can join them with Charlotte Crabtree this week. Thank you so much, We Are the City, for hosting this. Thank you so much to you guys for signing in. Please connect.